I just wanted to talk today about my school days. Does that term fill you with happy memories? Or for those of us who were neurodivergent without knowing that we were neurodivergent at school, it can be quite a challenging time. So I'm just going to share my story and see if you guys resonate, and I would love your comments and your experiences and your stories too. So I remember when I started primary school, and I struggled from the start, I think, really. I came into contact with other girls and didn't resonate with them at all, because they were all about doing everything together and talking about everything together, and the way that they spoke didn't seem to be straightforward, and they kept changing their minds about stuff every 5 minutes. Now, obviously, this is just normal neurotypical girl behaviour, and of course, I didn't see it in those terms then, but it didn't work for me. So I was always friends with the boys. My first friend was Ian McKinnon, and then there was James Robertson, and then there was Craig Flanagan. And these were my three kind of main friends through primary school. I did have a couple of female friends, but my sort of best friends were boys. And the reason for that is they weren't really interested in talking that much. They just wanted to play cars. Now, I have always been into cars. I particularly like great big ugly old estate cars. I drive one. I love them. And I used to absolutely love playing cars in the dirt at school. I did it at home anyway, and I used to love taking my cars in and showing the boys, and they'd show me what cars they had. And we would play cars together, and we wouldn't necessarily do a lot of talking. We'd just be kind of experiencing stuff side by side. And that worked really well. The only problem, of course, was that this was not acceptable to the other girls. I mean, honestly, 70s school, I don't know why none of the teachers picked up on the fact that I only had male friends. Or if they did, I don't know why nothing was ever sort of said about that. Anyway, so these boys, we'd play cars, or we'd play with little mini steam traction engines and things. But the girls really didn't like this. They didn't like somebody doing something different. Why wasn't I fitting in? And of course they took offence, and it was like, why don't you like us? Why are you ignoring us? That kind of thing. And so they basically bullied me. And that went on for, it wasn't really physical as far as I recall, but they would sort of tease me and chant things and, mean stuff like that. And to the extent that sometimes the boys were a bit like, don't really want to hang out today because you're just going to have that gaggle of girls and don't really want that to deal with that. So that was tricky for me, and so I did actually try. I think that was when I started masking, is like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to have female friends. So I do remember trying to be friends with a few girls, but those friendships weren't nearly as fulfilling. And in response to the bullying, unfortunately, I got myself a bit of a reputation, because in my home with my undiagnosed autistic dad, who was very fond of having autistic rage on a very frequent basis, what he would do is he knew how to read into you, see into you, and say something that would absolutely flay you to pieces, absolutely open you up and rip out your soul. And once he'd destroyed you and you were in tears, he'd say, oh, typical, how manipulative of you, turning on the tears. So I didn't cry for decades. I just learnt not to cry, because then you'd be attacked even more at home. But anyway, that was my fun family life. But yeah, so I learnt his technique, and unfortunately I learnt, because we neurodivergents, we are so good at reading people. We are so good at reading a situation, and we can absolutely see the weakness or the fear that somebody is hiding behind what they're apparently saying. And I was always able to see it, and so I knew exactly what to say to basically destroy somebody. And not proud of it, but that was That was my survival mechanism at like 7 or 8 years old. It's just what I'd grown up with, because of course it's funny, we normalise things, don't we? I didn't realise that that wasn't normal for any family, that your father would say something that would dash you to pieces. So yeah, so then I started getting in trouble with the teachers, because of course the girls would then burst into tears, run off and find a teacher and say, Lizzie said this or that. I used to be known as Lizzie when I was a child. The teacher would go, how could you say such a mean thing, such a cruel thing, blah, blah. And of course, it hadn't occurred to me to report the treatment I was getting to the teachers. So all they ever saw of this whole cycle was me saying terrible things. And I remember my parents coming out of school after a parents' evening, and I was sort of waiting for them in the playground, and they were like, "Oh my God, we're so ashamed of you. You got, how did you become such a nasty girl? Why are you so mean to the other kids around you? You know, no wonder they don't want to be your friends. No wonder you're stuck being with the boys." So, and they never mentioned the fact that I always did really well academically. That part of the feedback was, "Oh, she's clever as all fuck," right? But anyway, so that was the feedback I got. So I kind of grew up. So through primary school was basically, girls don't like you, boys are good to hang out with, and you have this weapon. You can defend yourself at any time by saying something to somebody. So, but I knew it wasn't going to get me very far. So I think certainly by secondary school, I was masking them. And I was desperately trying to be like the other girls. I was trying to look like them, do my makeup like them. And I was trying to keep up on all the sort of gossip and the minutiae and the different stories and who's fancying who, and very much trying to fit into that culture. And it just kind of went that way for the whole of secondary school. So my heart goes out to little kids like me, especially undiagnosed girls who might be really struggling and there's no real way out. And what did you learn through your school days about yourself? And what do you now realise was your undiagnosed neurodivergence? Of course, some of you, will have had dyslexia and things like that. And of course, that's all too physically obvious. So although you may have had a diagnosis, of course, there were very unhelpful attitudes about that, certainly back in the 70s and 80s when I was in school. So, yeah, I think that was the furnace in which my understanding about sort of human relationships, well, friendships and colleagues and things like that was forged. And I've had to do quite a lot of unpicking of that all my life. Obviously, I didn't know I was neurodiverse until the end of 23. But before then, I assumed it was to do with my trauma, because I did have a traumatic childhood, and my anxiety, my depression, and I gave myself unhelpful labels. I thought that I was unsuccessful. I thought I was a failure, and of course I was given labels in the workplace. I was told I was hard to manage, or bossy, or argumentative, because I would always be asking questions about like what's the reason for this directive, or whatever. But anyway, perhaps I'll get onto that in another video, but feel free to comment. I hope this has been helpful and you've resonated in some way about all the fun and games going through school as an undiagnosed neurodivergent girl.